I think that one look at Ronnie Coleman would suffice. One look at him in his prime as the king of the bodybuilding world should be enough for anyone to understand why this man is regarded as one of the best, if not the best bodybuilder in the world. Just one glance at his rippling muscles and giant body is enough to dispel any doubts about whether he's worthy of being compared to the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It only takes one look at Ronnie Coleman to make it known that he's truly a bodybuilding legend and that his name will be remembered today and forevermore. This simple sort of man hailing from Louisiana ended up becoming one of the greatest names in the sport of bodybuilding. And in spite of most people in the sport being young men who are ready to put the effort in and aren't bogged down by a sick body, Ronnie Coleman was winning competitions well into his early 40s. He holds multiple records in the world, including being one of the only 2 people in the world to win 8 Olympias in a row. What did Ronnie Coleman have that made him more deserving than the hundreds of other bodybuilders? How was such a legend even born? What is the story behind the king of bodybuilding? This is the story of Ronnie Coleman, a living bodybuilding legend. Early life and his first competition. Born in the small town of Monroe, Louisiana on May 13, 1964, it wasn't apparent at first glance just how strong Ronnie would be down the line. And really, for the first few years of his life, he was pretty normal. He was just another kid who went through the basic years of education of middle school and high school. However, he did have some special aspects even in high school, and was seen as a pretty decent football player by his coach. Once he was done with schooling, he decided to pursue a career in accountancy. He even got his bachelor's degree in the subject, taking on huge student debt in the process. But after graduation, he just didn't have good enough finances to afford a master's degree and couldn't find any work as an accountant to make back some of the money he'd lost. This meant that he had to look for odd jobs that he did here and there. One of the most notable jobs he ended up finding was working for minimum wage at a Domino's. The company had a policy that their workers could eat 1 complimentary pizza every day, and Coleman was extremely thankful for it. After all, he was so broke that he couldn't afford any food apart from his free pizza. But when he came across a newspaper advertisement, things would start to change for the better. The advertisement stated that the police academy had a vacancy. Coleman knew that a job in the police department didn't need any past experience. So thinking that it couldn't hurt to try, he ended up applying. Coleman still retained the athletic physique from his football years at high school, which became a crucial factor in him getting selected for the job. This truly became a turning point in Coleman's life. It was in 1990 that Coleman would finally be convinced by his fellow policeman, Gustavo Arlota. To Gustavo, it was obvious just how athletic and well-built Coleman was, and how well he could do if given proper training. Really, anyone who took one look at Coleman could note his amazing muscles and how much potential he has to get even better. And so, Gustavo suggested Coleman to go and apply for the Metroflex gym, run by an amateur bodybuilder by the name of Brian Dobson. When Coleman got there, it took Brian Dobson just one look. One look at Coleman for him to realize that this was his ticket to getting his brand known. Dobson ended up offering Coleman a lifetime membership if Coleman would train at his gym and allowed Dobson to guide him. Coleman ended up accepting this deal and began training together for all future events. The competition they were most preoccupied with was the 1990 Mr. Texas. As the day of the competition rolled closer, Coleman wasn't very concerned with the bodybuilding part of it. All he really cared about was the free gym membership, which allowed him to work out freely and as much as he wanted. But even then, the first competition of the King went exactly as you'd expect it to go. He won first place in the competition not only in his category, but also in the overall competition. He even managed to surpass his trainer, Dobson, and had successfully tasted his first victory. And there were many more to come. His slow rise to fame. Even though we know that Ronnie Coleman managed to get to the top of the bodybuilding world, his journey there was extremely slow and arduous to say the least. After his Mr. Texas win in 1990, his next major win would only be in 1995, when he won the Canada Pro Cup. This was a monumental deal as this meant he'd won his first professional competition, He would win it again for good measure the following year, and even won the Russian Grand Prix in 1997. But still, the famous Olympia eluded him. Ronnie and the Olympia went back a long time. His wins in the Olympia hid the many times he tried and failed. His worst attempt was also his first attempt in 1992, when he wasn't even ranked. But a couple years after that, in 1994, he managed to come 15th in that year's Olympia competition. The following years, he would climb the ranks slowly but surely, getting to 10th rank in 1995 and a rank of 6, just shy of the top 5 in 1996. However, in 1997, he still didn't manage to break into the top 5 and ended up 9th in the final ranking. Anyone who even had a touch of interest in his career would conclude that Ronnie Coleman had slipped and would be one of the many thousands of men who had great potential but didn't manage to make anything out of it. As 1998 rolled around and debate started over who would win, one name was on everyone's lips. Kenneth Wheeler was the one favored to win, and rightfully so, since he had been in the game a long time. Given nicknames like the Sultan of Symmetry, he was not someone to take lightly. People like Nasir Al-Sambaiti, Kevin Lovron, and Sean Ray were the ones who were suspected to really give Kenneth Flex Wheeler some trouble. If you asked someone where Ronnie Coleman stood, they would gaze at you with a lost expression. But Coleman wasn't backing down. Empowered from his Night of the Champions victory earlier in the year, Ronnie had prepared for a fight, and a fight was what he got. Later on, he would talk about Wheeler as the best bodybuilder he ever faced. But after a brutal and prolonged fight, Coleman came out on top by a margin of 3 points. Almost 8 years after entering the world of bodybuilding, Ronnie had won his first Mr. Olympia. But we all know that he was just getting started. The rise and fall of King. I think I don't even need to tell you about what would happen the next year and the year after and on up till 2005. Ronnie Coleman truly earned his nickname as the King of Bodybuilding and got 8 continuous Olympia wins. He is still one of the only 2 people to achieve this feat, but his list of achievements doesn't end there. He was the first person to win the Arnold Championship and Olympia in the same year in 2001. But those 8 years were no piece of cake for Ronnie. From Sean Ray to Kevin Lovron, he had to face some of the toughest bodybuilders in the world. But Ronnie was no chump and knew that the way to go was to maintain a strict diet and intense workout. Ronnie's workouts befit those of a king. He is known to constantly change the exact details of his routine, but one of the things that remains constant is his preference for focusing on each part of his body with 8 to 9 different exercises. He's a follower of the power building approach to bodybuilding, which basically means that 3 key exercises he goes for are deadlifts, bench presses, and squats. He also prefers free weights to machines and focuses a lot on maximizing flexibility and maintaining a huge muscle mass. But this is only complemented by his amazing diet. His diet is chock full of staple foods like chicken, lean beef, and eggs. In addition to that, he also goes for vegetables and rice. Not only that, but he also frequently takes supplements to better his diet and gains. These include L-arginine, which he takes twice a day, and Whey Blend, which he takes once every day. All of this makes nearly 5,562 calories consumed by him every day. His rigorous diet and nutrition are only reminders of just how strong the competition is, especially his 2 biggest rivals. I've already mentioned just how tough it was for Ronnie to beat Flex Wheeler. But just because his hardest fight was with Wheeler doesn't mean that he was Ronnie's biggest rival. No, we need to go a little further in the 2000s and talk about one of the biggest rivalries in wrestling history, and the man who challenged the King. Jay Cutler started around the same time as Ronnie Coleman, having his first win in 1993. But the similarities don't end there. Just like Ronnie, Cutler had gotten a college degree and had plans to do a more traditional job before finding bodybuilding. I think the best way to sum it up would be to say that Cutler could have been the best bodybuilder in the world if Ronnie Coleman didn't exist. Ronnie Coleman said that preparing for both the Arnold competition and the Olympia is exhausting, and he nearly had a collapse in 2001 because of the same. But Cutler managed to compete in both competitions for 3 consecutive years from 2002 to 2004. Not only did he win the Arnold all 3 times, but he also came second to Ronnie in Mr. Olympia during the same years. And in the end, it will be Jay Cutler who ended Ronnie Coleman's run in 2006 by dethroning the King. Today, Ronnie Coleman is retired and lives a relatively sedentary lifestyle. Due to the years of non-stop training and lifting heavy weights, he developed significant hip and back issues. This caused him to go for over a dozen surgeries during the 2010s and spent a significant sum on medical expenses. In June 2020, he revealed that he cannot walk unaccompanied as a result of botched surgery procedures. Instead of walking normally, he has to use crutches and a wheelchair to move around comfortably, which makes sense considering that he's turned 59 this year. But even today, he can be often seen in podcasts and conventions and has a robust social media presence. Ronnie Coleman has made history in the sport of bodybuilding, and no history of bodybuilding would be complete without mention of his name. He was the one who really ushered in the mass monster era, and even today, his huge physique shows bodybuilders what they have to achieve. Just one look at Coleman is all it takes to know that you're looking at the greatest bodybuilder in the world. And even today, even though he's far past his old Olympia days of glory, the story of Ronnie Coleman continues to inspire and motivate us to work out and achieve our dreams. To conclude the story of Ronnie Coleman, I'd like to reiterate what I said earlier. No history of bodybuilding would be complete without Ronnie Coleman, for he has defined the sport as much as the sport has defined him. In the end, he didn't just win 8 Olympias, but also the admiration and respect of people all over the world. With that, I would like to close this video and thank everyone who watched. If you enjoy Ronnie Coleman content, then consider subscribing and watching all my other videos. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.